So hello everyone. We're an artificial intelligence company that looks at mental health. We're based at the University of Oxford. We've been running for 5 years, and we thought we'd be done in 18 months. So this is a bit of a learning journey for us, and we know it's going to take longer than that. I wanted to share with you some results of our research, and we won't tell you very much about our company or what we do and the product. Instead, we're going to focus on what we learned recently because we thought it was really worthwhile sharing. But first, we're going to share our stories with you to tell you a bit about why we started building this in the first place.
So my story starts just like the rest of you. It starts with a vibration, not just a sound, but a vibration. The same first vibration that each and every one of us heard, the vibration of our mother's heartbeat. That was the beginning of the journey. I grew up in Africa. I grew up in Kenya. And I was always fascinated with, the way we were manipulated as we danced around the fire. I knew that that drum was actually manipulating my heart. It was manipulating my feet. And as I grew older, I started playing with music, and I understood that the BPM of the music was now connected to my heart, and I could move the crowd with the sound of my DJ booth, of the BPM, and the ability to not only project that sound into the crowd, but to raise the vibration. You could feel this communal energy as heartbeats started syncing. You could feel the entire energy of the room rise. I wanted to know that. I wanted to study it. I wanted to be a part of manipulating it. And so as the journey continued, I started a few different businesses in different parts of the world, and I burnt myself out significantly multiple times. And so I started diving down the study of the heart, and can we actually, the information that is contained in the heart, what can we learn from it? And so I spent 10 years building a company called Basis Science. It was the first wearable that had continuous heart rate directly from the wrist, as well as galvanic skin response, ambient temperature, and accelerometry. That company entered the market, and we were, through multiple iterations, we built a beautiful software, and within, a period of time, the data set that we had collected was extremely impressive, and we were able to sell the company to Intel. Post that, I met with David, and myself and David share a vision around the need for our technology to possess empathy. We believe that our technology needs to understand how we feel. And if it understands how we feel in real time, it can then adapt and adjust and enhance the human experience versus take it away. And so myself and David have been on a journey for the last few years, looking at how the biometrics, how the rhythm of our body can affect media experiences. And we'll tell you a little bit more about that after David says his little story.
Yeah, so Nadeem and I met after 10 years of me returning to research after having a cardiac arrest at Brussels airport. And I had a heart attack that shouldn't have happened. I was young, or relatively young. I was 30 years old. And there was a lot of stress in my life. I was running a software merger, and a piece of legislation changed to the European Parliament that I went to defend. We were based on the open source domain, and Microsoft won that battle, and I lost 60 million euros in a day. And a lot of people whose money I'd raised over a few years before that. So I flatlined, and then they brought me back. But Brussels Airport is an interchange airport. Loads of people die there. And it's a popular place to die. So the ambulance that resuscitated me sent something called the dead code, and that essentially tells the hospital that the person arriving is dead on arrival. So they start forensic paperwork almost right away, because loads of people die. So when I woke up, I got handed incomplete, luckily, forensic paperwork for myself, and I found that really confusing, right? It was like, and the nurse that talked to me said, I wanted to give you this because you suits usually stay dead, right? And I don't get to talk to you about why you die, And none of you have cardiovascular disease. None of you have anything wrong with you. You die of exhaustion and stress. Right? So now that I have a live one, you died of exhaustion and stress. Go fix yourself, right? So I went back and I did anything but, right? I didn't think that it would be possible for me to just have a cardiac arrest like that if there wasn't anything wrong with me. So I took cheeky advantage of the national healthcare system in the UK, and I did every test under the sun. And they, for a bit, thought there was something wrong with me, and they really found nothing. There was nothing wrong with me. So then I started to look into it, and I thought, well, I'm an artificial intelligence researcher, and I deal in computational intelligence that looks at time series data. How can I instrument myself so that this never happens again? And for that matter, could I instrument everybody, right? So that never happens again, so that we don't just keep randomly dying at exchange airports because we burn ourselves out. But that turned out to be really difficult to do. So I focused first on the brain, then that turned out to be really difficult to do in a portable kind of 24/7 monitoring kind of way. Now there's unbelievable companies like Muse that are doing ridiculous, amazing stuff with headsets that empower everybody in our community. But back then there was nothing like that. So when I got really far with the research, I came to see Nadeem because he had the only band that I could use to gather the data I needed in conjunction with what I was doing with the brain. But we both actually shared the same interest in the heart. We realized that actually the connection that we make to our own bodies is more important than any other connection we make, right? Without that connection, we don't have empathy. We can't actually connect with anybody else. And what I realized is that the reason we die of burnout is not that we don't understand what burnout is. The reason we die is because we can't feel our bodies anymore. We start being able to feel hungry, thirsty, and pathetic, right? We get something called alexithymia, which only autistic people usually suffer from, the inability to classify emotion. So this journey is taking us around. Forgive the slide kind of investment deck format of this slide, but it's just to explain very briefly who we are. We've gone through some clinical trials. We're bridging the world between Oxford's biomedical engineering and experimental psychology departments, two departments that have never talked before, which gives you a sense of just how dumb we are about what the human condition means. Right? The fact that we didn't think of instrumenting it until now is appalling. There's a few of us, some Oxford professors, and then a few of us that are retraining as neuroscientists and doing doctorates there. This is what we work on. It's a unified computational model of the physiology, neurology, and psychology of stress, of human stress. We started with just the physiology, just looking at heart rate variability, circadian rhythm, resting HR. Then we figured out that actually, we forgot to ask the person how they felt, right? So we started asking them that, levels of neuroticism, depression, anxiety, and stress scales. And we started to look at the organizational neuroscience aspect of the person. How did they feel at home? And I'll come back to that because that's really the oh my God moment that we had when we started playing in large-scale trials. This computational model is a machine learning model. It's partly just a large Bayesian statistics model, but it is now looking at 280,000 people in the wild on how to classify emotional state in real time, but not from the point of view of what emotion is this person feeling, simply from the emotional resilience point of view. We did a trial initially with 600 bankers in London during Brexit, and they were French. Yeah. And that was really lucky for us.
Not so lucky for them.
Not so lucky for them. They didn't think it was funny at all. But we thought it was the luckiest stroke for a data scientist ever, right? You're an epidemiologist and you think, all right, let's just instrument these guys and see what happens in distress. And suddenly the nuclear bomb of stress drops on them, and every screen, and they look at 6 screens at a time, every single one of them, right? And every screen was red, right? There was a heart attack. There was several people passed out. There was it should tell you something that banks in London, their well-being strategy includes having their own paramedic team. Right? This is how shitty we are at taking care of people. Anyway, so during that study, we found several astonishing things, right? One was that the wearable we used, which we then came to manufacture our own because the wearable we were using just wasn't good enough, but we captured a lot of really interesting data. Here are amazing things that we found. First thing, people's level of stress goes up when they go home, not down, right? That means that they're at home, still at work here, but at home here, right? So they're impersonating mothers and fathers and partners, but actually they're still trying to deal with the stress of work. They're ruminating inside, right? So of course at work they have the controls of work, they have the ambit of work, they have the tools, but at home they don't, right? So they lose control of that, but they're still, demand is still being put on them. They're double, triple agents. That was the first thing that blew our mind. The second one was that in many cases, people who went beyond a certain level of stress stopped feeling almost altogether, right? So when we asked them questions about neuroticism or emotion, they answered in ranges that only autistic spectrum disorder people answer with, right? So we suddenly realized, oh wait, hold on, stress makes you autistic, right? So if this is true, and several neuroscientists and us at Oxford believe that this is true, then the theory of neurovisceral integration is also true, right? So Thayer and all these people here at UCLA and Stanford and so on are true in that we're made of gut more than we are made of brain. This is a perceptron, and this is our brain, right? And if that's true, and if this is our brain, then the moment we lose connection with that, we become less human. In fact, we become inhuman. Can't feel, and that means that you can't feel what the other person is feeling, which means you're unempathetic and unsympathetic. So those two things were mind-blowing to find out. Yes, we managed to relax them, to a certain extent, and the breathing sessions that we collected from that, and the data we collected otherwise physiologically was amazing. But those two findings changed everything we do. Now, I told you that I wouldn't tell you much about the product, but it's basically an app and a sensor that we've made, a bunch of cloud infrastructure. We collect the well-being data. There's mood logging tools, physiological logging tools, and neurological games that we play to test executive function in the brain, which also goes with stress. And then every user has an in-app dashboard that they sort of track the patterns with, right? But here's the problem.
I think it's important to let them know why we created our own device and what's contained in the device.
Yeah, that's a very good point, right? So most wearables out there today capture fitness data, right? They focus on fitness, right? They don't focus on emotional resilience or stress, right? But even more importantly than that, they also try to communicate with you. They give you your text, they give you your notifications and so on. So none of the incumbents, and we've worked with all of them, want developers to have access to 24/7 real-time data that has to do with cardiovascular data, right? Because it would kill their batteries too quickly and it would hurt their user experience. They're promising you the world on your wrist, right? And we had to change that. So we went and manufactured a wearable that only captures mental health data and doesn't care about your texts, and in fact tries very hard not to bother you otherwise, right? It is not bringing the world to your wrist. It's just looking inward at the world that you represent. We started publishing in several different journals, and the publication that we gave to the Frontiers of Human Neuroscience journal then got coverage around the world because we said that we could see a live index of rumination, so worrying about things like over and over, like when you worry, I should have said this, or I should have finished that report at work, at night at 3 a.m. and you send an email. That's rumination, right? And it changes your cardiovascular profile so that it starts to look like cardiovascular disease risk, right? And we saw the proof in that data, and the neuroscience community peer-reviewed it and validated it, and then the press said, worrying about work kills you, right? And journalists, you gotta love them. So, not true, of course it doesn't, it will kill you, but it's not the link we found. What we found is that there was a risk. All of this amounts to one word, and that's interoception. This is where our research brought us, right? Sense of one's own body signal. Interoceptive awareness is how aware you are when you're hungry, when you're thirsty, when you have to pee, that sort of thing. But the problem is that so far we have this sort of like superhuman understanding or perception of what interoception is, right? So that cartoon is a perfect explanation, right? So when Spider-Man gets tingles in the face of danger, it's Spidey sense, right? But when you sense it, people will accuse you of being anxious. Right? And you're not being anxious, you're thinking, right? You're thinking through the right brain, the intuitive brain. The problem with this is bringing somatic awareness, and by somatic I mean of the body, to stress resilience, we now understand is probably the most impactful pathway of research in the psychophysiology of stress that we can have, right, as a community, if we address the body first. Focus on the connection to the body in whatever field. And this is a connection Nadeem made during the 10 years he raised bases, right? And maybe
one of the impetuses behind creating such a technology was that, as humans, we have no real choice but to be pretty vain. And so, the amount that we care about our outside appearance is primarily because we're constantly looking at it and because others are looking at it. And so every time that we look in the mirror, we're always concerned about our blemishes in our face and how we look. And unfortunately, there hasn't been anything to sonify or to show you a real-time picture of your heart or how it's performing. And the belief set around, if I could see my heart and I could hear it and I could feel it, I would care more about it. I would be able to create that relationship with my heart. And so some of the experiments what we've done is, building a very interesting music engine behind our technology, which allows, firstly, for it to pick up the real-time, beat or signature of your heart and sonify that through a bass. And then beyond that, start building a unique rhythm, a unique melody that comes from your biorhythm, from the rhythm of your breath rate. And therefore, if that continues to evolve and that experience becomes better and more engaging and entertaining, we create a deeper, more empathetic relationship with our heart. And that is one of the missions that we're on, is to help people create that relationship with their heart.
And I don't want to turn this into a conversation, but as I remember it, you spent 10 years building probably the best instrumented wearable that there was, and it's even today we can't find one that had as many sensors, right?
Yeah.
But the engagement and bringing people to care about that data in a way that changed their behavior was super hard for you, right? For everybody, but
it's a hot topic,
hard.
Right? We always talk about the topic of behavioral change, and just because you have data, and just because that data is pretty cool, does that mean people are actually going to use it frequently and change their behavior based on it?
No.
And that's where a lot of the real art and of course science comes in the gamification, if you will, of said data, in the engagement of the data. How entertaining can that data be? But it's very interesting because after 10 years of building the company, I find myself still trying to recover from that journey. I find myself, as David has pointed out many times, when we go into certain meetings and he notices certain things, he'll let me know that, it's actually PTSD. And as most of you might know, if you've built a startup before and tried to raise money and build teams and do all the good stuff, you probably know that you too suffer PTSD from that process. And so, the idea of what we're building now is to, one, heal ourselves, and in turn, help others heal themselves and create the relationship with their body.
And why do that, right? And we have this conversation a lot, and I'm sorry for turning into a conversation, but it's something that we never quite resolve, right? How it is that we survive ourselves, the story of ourselves, the things we do. I see him physiologically change when we go into a business meeting, right? And otherwise, he's smiling, he's empathetic and so on, and then it's not anymore, right? And there's sort of, autistic, not autistic, autistic, not autistic, right? And
more autistic.
And I see that, and I see it in myself, and I see it in everybody now. It's hard not to, because I've seen the data, right? The reason why is because we think we need a real-time algorithmic classification of competence, of social competence, of social and emotional competence. This is so needed, right? There would be no Trump if this was the case, right? You wouldn't have that. It wouldn't exist, right? If we instrumented emotional competence globally, if it was taught at schools, right? If this was a subject at school, right? It wouldn't happen. Now, here's another reason why. Atypical interoception, which is when you can't feel anymore, right? It leads to decreased social-emotional competence, right? It makes you alexithymic, right? You cannot feel emotion anymore, right? So that means you can't deal with people very well anymore. So does that mean that improving interoception could improve empathy? This is the thesis of our work at Oxford. But that's always been here, right? And this is, I'm preaching to the converted now, and forgive me, but it's important that we say it and we recognize it, and I realize, again, you all know this, but the idea of connecting to our bodies as a way to understand our minds has been there from a long time, right? 4,000, 5,000 years? But in Buddhist practice, in Islamic practice, in Judeo-Christian practice, but also in just pagan practice and in conversation, right? For thousands of years, we've said to each other, I feel you, right? Or like, my heart is breaking. And we've been dying literally of heartbreak for that many thousands of years, understanding that that's what kills us. It's not the brain. Your brain is not going to give you a heart attack. It's your heart gives you a heart attack, right? You suffer in the body. As Bessel van der Kolk famously put it, right? The body keeps the score, right? That's where it stores everything. This is what we think through, right? We think that in the new, that the brain is everything. And as Ariel just put it, right? Even if you're a company that puts, the most amazing headset on people's minds to illuminate it, you will end up with the heart. You will end up leading full circle down to the body, right? This bit of the brain, or where we contain executive function, the prefrontal and ventromedial regions of the brain, they give us executive decision making, but they don't give us gut instinct. Again, we think that part of the brain is how we can measure when stress kills somebody's ability to make a good decision, but actually they've already made the decision, right? In their gut, their brain is just waiting to receive the data, right? It processes and receives the data, and then the body knows whether it's a good idea to hand your baby to the stranger so you can fetch something, right? You don't know it before or after, you know it in the moment. Here's the hypothesis, right? If we improve interoception, could we see an improvement in empathy and resilience, right? And how could we go about that? How could we go about improving interoception, right? We think that interoception can help us actually measure resilience. In the 60s and the 70s, there were people like Joseph Chandry and Paul Whitehead and several other people who came up with protocols to measure interoception, and everyone kind of forgot about it. And we found these because we suddenly realized from the studies that we've carried through that we were seeing data where the disconnect was so real that we needed to test, right, whether improving it would change things. So over the last 18 months, we've carried out a research project where we measured interoception in people through a prototype smartphone app, right? Just to prove two things. One, that interoception can be measured remotely, even if the lab clinician isn't there, even if they're not wearing a chest strap. And two, that measuring interoception itself has an effect on interoceptive awareness, right? So measurement changes everything. The thing you observe changes because you're observing it, and you're all familiar with that. Now, the anterior cingulate cortex and the neural systems linked to interoception have not been proven to, but are quite likely linked to the ability to perform under stress, to stress resilience itself. And if this is true, if you improved ACC activity and the neural systems that deal with interoception, you'd probably also improve stress resilience. But you can't do that by meditating. Why is that? It's impossible to meditate abstractly about something you only can feel physically, right? And here's the thing, right? There I don't know, maybe hundreds of forms of meditations that focus on the body and body scanning. But actually, there's only one way that you can really listen to your heart, and that's to listen to it, right? And that's not really a form of meditation. It's quite literally just a simple form of biofeedback. So actually, we need a better understanding of what facets contribute to low stress resilience so that we can understand what biomarkers of change relate to that concept, to interoception itself. Now, what we think here is that it's possible. And again, this is a theory, and we thought we'd share it with you because it relates to how we see bankers, right? And insurance people and bankers are our guinea pigs right now, and so this is the people we take care of, and they suffer greatly, and they don't want to talk about it. So what we do is we look at whether interoceptive training could lead to just better emotional intelligence. Well, what does that mean? Somebody can be more emotional intelligent, but does it make them a better husband, a better father, a better mother, a better partner, a better colleague? Does it make them a better leader? So we understood almost from the start that you cannot measure the emotional resilience of an individual unless you measure her tribe, right? It's impossible to measure an individual. You can only measure the ecosystem around the individual. What you measure about the individual influences everybody else. If I improve interoceptive awareness in you and that improves your empathy, it will improve the lives of everyone around you. It's so simple, right? So, but that needs efficacy measurement, right? We've based ourselves on evidence from the very start, which has made our lives very difficult. And let me tell you what, Oxford University's Ethics Committee are the Inquisition, right? Both from an ethical perspective, and their fear of the Orwellian and their skepticism of everything we do is helpful to us. Yeah, it's super helpful. Because here's the thing, I can take care of an entire organization's thinking around well-being, but if we put this out in public and it fails to see suicidal ideation and one person dies because of it, we're done. And this is the thing that we really want to bring to you today, is the fact that we've now seen data that scares the shit out of us. We have a duty of care and our responsibility as a community that I don't think we're paying full attention to. I don't think we're fully aware that this is going to be more dangerous than the introduction of benzodiazepam, than the introduction of antidepressants, than the idea that you could, cure anxiety with cocaine in syrups in the 1800s, right? We're proposing that we can take control of our own minds when we don't even understand the human condition. And that means that unless we are completely based on evidence and evidence-based at every step, we could do tremendous harm. Thank you.
So we're on a mission to ideally help alleviate human suffering and connect each human to their heart. And we know all of you are on that same mission, so we thank you very much.
Thank you.